Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're talking about how to not settle in dating with relationship coach, doctor of integrative medicine, and host of the Brianna Approved podcast. It's Dr. Brianna Diorio. Have we got a lot to get to today, and here's what you can expect. First, we'll explore what it really means to settle in dating and the different ways this shows up, whether that's settling for the wrong person, someone's potential, or accepting singleness when you don't really wanna. We'll also talk about the experience of staying too long in the wrong relationships because sometimes we have so much invested already or don't want to be alone. Brianna will guide us through common scenarios like the quest for perfection, the role of fear in all of this. So many of us are worried about settling and the difference between preferences and priorities in dating. Finally, we'll discuss why discernment and alignment are more important than time, and we'll hear strategies for trusting your intuition and knowing when to walk away if that's right for you. If you've ever found yourself wondering how to slow down in dating and let go of the settling trap, this episode is for you. Let's do this, flirties, and meet Brianna.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, up for conversation on the show today, how to not settle in dating, with the host of the Brianna Approved podcast and the creator of the relationship ebook, Reflect and Connect. It's Dr. Brianna Diorio. Hello.
Hi, Benjamin. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited.
Hello and welcome to Flirtations.
Yes, I love it. I love the vibe. I love the energy that we have already going.
Me too. We're going to have some fun today. How's your day going so far?
It's been great. You know, I'm in New Jersey, so I'm on the East Coast. I think
Yes.
Are you in California?
No, East Coast as well.
Oh, I thought, because I feel like I see Trader Joe's things. And when I lived in California, that was like the first place I ever saw Trader Joe's. But okay, so East Coast vibes.
A few here. I'm in North Carolina. Yeah.
Oh, nice. My dad's in North Carolina.
Beautiful, although we're in full pollen season right now. I am just glad to be here. My voice is working. I can breathe.
Talk about something not being sexy on like a date, just blowing your nose
God.
and just, mucus coming up. And you're just like, well, we're here, guys. So we made it.
We made it. We're going to do this. So, Brianna, how did you get started in this work of relationships, of coaching? I've really gotten to know you through your TikTok content, which is incredible. If you're on TikTok and not following, do also follow on Instagram. But how you got started doing this?
Thanks for I love your content as well, because you keep it real and I think you make it relatable. And I think that's what people want nowadays is authenticity, and to feel like, especially when you're going through something with life and relationships and dating, you just want to feel like you're not alone. And a lot of the times when you're getting out of something, there's been a version of you that hasn't felt validated or understood or seen. So it's kind of like this emotional life raft to be like, you get what I've gone through too. You also have been through the fire and healed those wounds. So it's interesting because, I've had my own private practice for over a decade now, but started more in the functional medicine side of things. Dealing with health, being a, nutritionist, having my PhD in integrative medicine. But there was always an underlying theme of stuff that was outside of health. So a lot of the times it went back to what's going on with your relationship with yourself, people that you allow in your life, the thoughts and conversations that you have with yourself, and how influential and detrimental or impactful that can be in your life. So it kind of was just a natural evolution where, somebody would come to talk to me about their GI issues. And then I'd be like, right. And what kind of friendships do you have? Or what kind of romantic partnerships do you have? And I think what I try to do a good job of is understanding that, yes, romantic relationships, I think, are a bit more relatable to people. But when I talk about relationships, I mean relationships as a blanket statement, because whether it's the relationship you have with yourself, with a coworker, with a homie, with a friend that's been in your life too long, that's not serving you anymore, and then laddering up into romantic, they usually have some kind of Venn diagram going on. And so it's all those principles kind of apply outward.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like really central to my mission as the flirt coach too. A big theme on Flirtations and in my content is the theme of connection.
Yeah.
It's really essential to everything we do, to health. This is so interesting. Some of my formal coaching training is in functional medicine.
There you go. Well, you know why? Because I think in functional medicine, what they understand a lot is the idea of getting to the root of the issue.
Yes.
You're not just treating the symptom.
Yes.
And so if you take it in the lens of dating, it's like this idea of, well, why do I keep dating the same person? And it's this idea of that you don't have a type, you have a pattern. And, you know, you see it in health too, of like, some people just have a propensity towards, you know, in Chinese medicine, they'll call it like hypo or hyper or, you know, having different constitutional types. And I think we kind of create this in relationships and dating. And of course, it goes back to what kind of relationships were modeled to us, what kind of things we had to do to feel loved, whether that was, you know, in school or, you know, as a child or even older in relationships. Where did I learn that my worth is tied to external things or that I need to be chosen or helpful? And so where did I learn to fix and tolerate things? And so that kind of parallels with health stuff. And a lot of the times you really can't separate out, because you can have like a perfect diet and go to the gym 7 days a week and all that. But if you're stuck in kind of, you know, an emotional captivity because of the life that you've, you know, co-signed for, that sucks. And I would argue that that's going to be much more detrimental than the other things that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I remember from my training, we talked about the soup and we had these frameworks and these different matrices we would use. And it was so useful for me, even though I didn't really focus in physical health and wellness for coaching and I went more flirting and dating. It's still, you know, I work with someone or I get a question or like something comes up in the comments on a live and it's like, oh, I'm having all of this anxiety. Okay, well, anxiety is just a symptom. That's just what we're able to observe and feel. Why? Is it a belief? Is it a pattern? Is it a story? What's going on with the connection, the relationship we have with ourselves, with what's happening in the relationship we're talking about, whether we're dating, whether we're in a committed relationship. So I love that functional medicine gives us this lens to really look at, like you said, the root, because that's where, ultimately, that's where we want to go.
And it's so interesting because now more than ever, especially a lot of people are talking about nervous system regulation. Is this person good for my nervous system? There's a lot of research now that talks about how your microbiome can actually adapt to the person that you're living with. But also your body has decided before, or I should say your body has decided for you way before you have logically accepted what you need to do. And so I think it's the idea of kind of merging those two worlds. Or, you know, you hear a lot of people like, when I was with this person, I, you know, was tired all the time, or I was fatigued or bloated. I gained a bunch of weight. I wasn't eating. I couldn't physically sleep next to them. So your body is much more intuitive than the mind. And it's really interesting to now kind of see those worlds collide.
Yeah. I agree. And have you seen, it's, I mean, not funny, but I'm laughing a little bit, but this current trend on TikTok where it's two pictures like back to back, one me now. And it's like, oh, glowy, healthy, gorgeous, right? Lovely, happy. And then flashback to the picture of me in my last relationship, basically saying, this is why I'm single. And then in my last relationship, everything you were just describing, right?
I did a post about that, talking about, everybody talks about the post, the breakup, glow up afterwards, but nobody talks about the glow down that happens in the relationship, that it's not until you get out when people are like, you know, you just didn't look like yourself, or, you know, in photos, you could tell you. And I'm just like, information I could have used yesterday. Not that I would have listened, but it is interesting how, you know, if you have a few people in your circle that you respect and trust, they can see some of those things that we put blinders on when you're in it. Yeah.
If you're glowing down in your relationship, something to notice.
Yeah. something to be aware of if you feel like you're glowing down.
Food for thought here on this day. Okay. So as we get into settling, this is such a big topic. I think it's a big fear, a worry, a thought a lot of daters have of, oh my gosh, I don't want to settle. I don't want to choose wrong or pick wrong. And so when it comes to settling and dating, got some questions here from the flirties. They came through as always, but what do you feel like it means to settle? Just to give some context to the word.
I think it's that idea of, if you have to ask somebody, am I settling in this relationship? there's some version of you that something is not aligned or something is feeling off, right?
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you're going to be 100% happy every single day and that, that list that you have of 500 things that you want in your partner, there's a difference between, priorities and preferences and having core values and compatibility and things that are going to complement the relationship. So I think you have to understand it through that lens. But it's this idea if there's been this kind of ambivalence for a while and you've been feeling unsure and you're kind of like looking for permission from other people to be like, well, what do you think about this? Or even if that's just an internal dialogue that's been going on for quite some time, it's that idea of like, how do you know if you should leave a relationship? And I'm like, if you're asking, there's a good chance that you know what you need to do. You're just not ready to do it. You don't have the tools. Or for some people, there's a lot of that like, well, it's not that bad. It's not bad enough to leave. It's not good enough to stay. Maybe this is the best that I can get. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to start over again. There's like all those jokes of I went from having somebody who I told my deepest, darkest secrets to, and then going on a first date and being like, so where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? And that idea of that is just, it's gut-wrenching and it's overwhelming and daunting. So I think you have to first have a very honest conversation with yourself and have a level of self-awareness that if nobody else was watching and you thought that this was the best that you could get and nothing was going to change, because a lot of the times we stay in for the hope and the one-day wager, as Matthew Hussey calls it, if this relationship was going to continue on as is, is this how I want to be loved for the rest of my life? And am I really being true to myself? Because you know what it's like to feel happy for yourself, not other people in the comparison game, but you've been in the relationship with yourself the longest out of anybody in this life. You've pulled yourself out of breakups and tough times and friendship ruptures and tough conversations. And you know what it's like to kind of start to lose yourself. So I think it's understanding to thy own self be true, as cliche as that is. But, is there a version of me that feels like when I'm in this relationship, am I shrinking myself? Am I not being my most expansive version? Am I not being my most authentic self? Am I fantasizing about, other relationships or lifestyles? Do I have I upgraded my definition of love and healthy partnership and what that looks like? Because that's okay too. If you got into a relationship when you were younger, you didn't feel like you were settling, and now you have, a new operating system and new standards and new definitions. So I think you have to really do a really tough, honest conversation with yourself and then take that answer and actually do something with it. Again, it's that idea of knowing what we need to do versus actually doing it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. You're hitting on so many different experiences we're going to have in dating and relationships, depending on maybe where we're at in the dating process or we're in a relationship. And sometimes what I hear from the flirties is for those that are single, it's this fear of, oh, well, I don't want to pick the wrong person. Or like, oh, I don't want to get into a relationship with someone, right? It's not the right fit. Or now you're in the relationship, you're starting to date someone and it's like, oh, what if, you're starting to look over there, grass is greener on the other side kind of thing. Like, I think these are really common experiences we have dating, but ultimately what you were talking to, it's that relationship with the self. Like I'll oftentimes tell the flirties, if you're being true to yourself, as cliche as that is, and you at least have a short list of checks boxes, some values, some lifestyle things you're looking for. Are you in alignment with someone? Do you want the same type of relationship, right? Are you both growth mindset oriented? You've got some goals you're working on. Are they challenging you, really pushing you to be your best self? Well, as long as you're meeting those non-negotiables for yourself, I don't think you have to worry about settling so much.
I think you also have to trust yourself, right?
Yes.
And so self-trust and self-worth, especially if you've gotten in relationships or you've had the same patterns repeat where you're like, but I thought I learned that lesson.
Yeah.
There's a version of yourself that you're almost disappointed in because you're like, how are we here again? How are we doing this again?
Absolutely.
Right? And so you say like, do I not have the tools? Have I not evolved? And I always tell people and tell this to myself as a reminder that learning is about repetition. Some people are quick learners and they get it the first time and they're like, got it, that burnt me, I'm out. Some people are hard, slow learners. And in order to integrate the lesson, they need repetition. They maybe need to go back one more time. They need to have one more bad relationship to realize, okay, I will literally never tolerate this again, right? So, and trusting that if this does implode in my face, that I have enough tools, I have the emotional acuity, I have the support and the self-love for myself that I will be okay and I'll be able to put my life together again.
Yeah.
And I think you have to also, again, being honest with yourself, understanding, is this a connection or is this an unhealthy attachment? Because a lot of the times when people start to get that rumbling in the relationship of like, well, I don't know, am I settling? Am I not happy? These people are doing that.
Yeah.
We don't want to play the comparison game, but is this actually mutually fulfilling? Is it expansive? Is there genuine love and respect? Do our core vision, value, lifestyles, do those align? Is there emotional security? Is there interdependence in the relationship, right? Is there emotional safety? Those things that are really the foundation. And then is there, again, a level of unhealthy attachment that's what I'm really clinging to, which is, again, like your fear-based, conditional, scarcity mindset, all of that. And you're so desperate to keep that alive rather than, seeing what I could possibly gain if I left this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. That's definitely me. A stubborn gay Libra. I have to learn my lessons just a handful of times until eventually
Benjamin, I'm an Aquarius, okay? You're not telling an Aquarius what to do. I'm like, no? Okay, don't tell me what to do. I'll purposely do the opposite, and I'll do it on my own timeline.
Oh my gosh. That is so me. I'm going to figure this out for myself.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, you want me to break up with him? Now I'm going to date him for another 3 months and I'll learn the lesson. That was younger Brianna. I don't do that now, but back in the day, my mom always joked. She's like, oh, I should say that I love him then, so you'll break up with him. And I'm like, yeah, do that.
Oh my God. So relatable. Yes. If there's an easy way or a hard way, I'm going to pick the hard way just because.
I am a slow and hard learner. But you know what? You know what's actually really, I think, great about that is because it makes you value the lesson, I think, a lot more because you're
true.
Wow, it took me 6 months to claw myself out of that situation. The next time it took me 4 months. The next time it took me 1 month. And now that it's finally, ingrained into me and my new operating system, I saw what it took for me to get out of that and to remove those kind of people from my life. And so now the level of entry to get to me is much higher. And I think it helps actually build your self-esteem and trust again, because you're like, look, I know it didn't go exactly as planned the second, third, fourth time, but I still got out. And that I think is what people forget, is that if there's a version of you that wants to be in a relationship so bad and you want love and connection, because we all do, but you're still willing to be like, but this isn't it, and walking away because you're being true to yourself, then that actually shows how strong of a person that you are, and that every no is getting you closer to that yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe longer and harder to learn the lesson, but I feel like it's grounded right now. The experience, the lesson, the knowledge, the awareness, the connection to my own intuition. Yeah, like if I come into a dating situation, to a relationship that isn't fulfilling, it's taking more from me, more than it's giving. It's not complimentary. It's very draining. I'm not going to stay longer than I should be staying. No, I'm going to get up on out of there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be.
And no one can ever take that lesson away from you, which is nice too. Like, maybe you have some of the emotional scars and you're dealing with the emotional shrapnel, but that lesson, like nobody's ever, once you graduate from, your master's degree to a PhD, no one's taking that away from you.
Right. All right, I want to come back to connection versus attachment. I love that theme. And you were talking about connection versus unhealthy attachment. And so what I was hearing from the Flirties putting this together is some of the ways they may settle as a single person, which is a part of this conversation as well. Sometimes we settle for our singleness when we really would like to be dating. We would like to be in a relationship. But some things that were mentioned here, and I'm sure you see this too, this fear of being alone, right? So maybe we settle just because we have someone by our side, someone to text, to call, even if it's not healthy. The fear of rejection. Maybe we just cling to this person, we chase, we want to fix, give so much of ourselves because we don't want to lose them. What if we never find someone again, right? Talking about that scarcity mindset and this what if this is as good as it gets kind of thing. I think that's something daters think to themselves sometimes too, even though in your heart of hearts and your intuition, things ain't all the way there. So speaking to connection versus attachment a little bit, I'd love to hear more.
I think people need to really always be calculating the future cost of my current decision, because that's what a lot of it is. is they say, well, I will just stay. Or it is tough out there. I don't want to start over again. I don't want to be alone. This is probably the best that I can get. Or maybe I don't deserve to be loved like that, right? I am going to choose this familiar hell over this unfamiliar heaven. And so you have to realize that you will pay debt on that decision later in life. And for some people, it maybe be like they might have a situation where the debt has already accrued. They have a mortgage with somebody, they have children with somebody. It's a lot. The exit strategy is a lot more difficult, right? The barrier of exit. So I think you have to understand this kind of cost benefit analysis of what will it cost me if I continue on this path and stay? And simultaneously, what would I be able to gain if I actually left this relationship? And again, going back to this idea of understanding that I trust myself, that I will be okay. I love myself. And again, if not this, something better. So much of dating is actually a numbers game. It's getting rid of the wrong people sooner so you can make space for the right people and people who are more aligned. But a lot of that is you have to look at your relationship with endings. My dear friend, Christina Rice, she actually wrote a book called The Codes of Divine Love, and it talks a lot about the energetics and frequency of connections and relationships. It's an amazing book. I would recommend it to anybody.
Okay.
But she talks a lot about this idea of like the contract is up. And just like any other contract in your life, you kind of have to look at it and be like, listen, the terms and conditions of this contract is you came into my life to teach me what I'll never tolerate again, or to have an honest conversation with myself, or I said I wanted this kind of life and I'm, settling for this here. So where am I living out of alignment? And again, taking the ownership, you have to take the responsibility, because nothing changes if nothing changes, right? Exactly. And so if you're not going to be the one to say, this is not enough for me, there's a really good chance that the other person is kind of co-creating this same environment where it's like, it's good enough, it's okay. But if you want that expansive life, like what would it feel like for me to actually choose myself? And what would it feel like for me to be in a healthy, fulfilling relationship? Like the comfort is not the same thing as compatibility, and understanding where am I choosing from a place of that. So I think it goes back to taking responsibility and understanding where you're going to probably have to, again, as Matthew Hussey talks about, throwing a grenade into your own life. And that's scary, because you're like, well, now I'm going to have to rebuild it. And so sometimes it's not bad enough for some people. And they're just like, I can live with it like this. And that then then your options are, then you don't necessarily get to complain about that anymore. And I know that sounds really harsh and callous, but you can change something, you can accept it, or you can kind of, keep on this path. And that decision is in your court.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something came to mind just as you were speaking, is like, of course, when we're dating and in relationships, there's someone else there too, right? So maybe they're having this experience where they're feeling a little bit disconnected, or something's going through, like you're going through a phase in your life, something with like a loss of a family member, a loved one, a job, something like that. And so I think it's reasonable that there's going to be these ebbs and flows, of course, in dating and relationships. And this is why communication skills and just trusting, knowing yourself will always be so important. So even if you feel like you're quote unquote settling, maybe you're in one of those ebbs as opposed to a flow. But knowing yourself, ultimately, I love how you talked about this, right? Sort of, you're going to pay the debt eventually, right? What is the cost to your future self if, this other person isn't even willing to have a conversation? If they seem like
you kind of have to do like a P&L sheet of your life. And I know that doesn't sound sexy and romantic, but operationalizing your life, Alex Hormozi talks about it a lot. It's actually quite helpful, because, again, I think you have to also understand that, like, having needs is what I want and deserve. And then what's not being fulfilled in my life. Like, if that is something that's going to really move the needle for you, and you need that to feel seen and heard and understood and valued, and, have this expansiveness in other areas of your life, you shouldn't feel bad about that. And I think sometimes people feel bad, and they also have to understand who they're dating now. The version of who you dated in the beginning isn't always the version of the person that you're breaking up with. And what happens is people conflate the two. And they're like, but in the beginning they did X, Y, Z, and they did this. And I'm like, but that is not who you're breaking up with. You're breaking up with the reality and the average of the person that you're dating. And I think, again, going back to relationship math, if you could look at the average of the person that's showing up in the relationship, what is the average of our rupture repair ratio? What's the average of the person that's showing up? on average, how often do I feel supported and emotionally safe and understood, right? So it's like looking at the average of their actions, behaviors, and patterns and making your decision off of that, not the high highs or the low lows. Like, where is the relationship most of the time?
Yeah. That is so true. I'm glad I know what P&L stands for.
Yes, math. Listen, I was a Spanish major undergrad. I'm not even like a math major, but I think that sometimes we gotta take out the spreadsheets.
It's true, and that is one of the dating lessons that I had to learn many times, and that is dating the potential, right? The version of who someone was in the beginning, and where did that person go? I want that person back. Bring me
but
back.
Was it actually? I have theories on this, because where did they go, or was that actually? That's not who they actually ever were. It just took you some time to see who they finally are, and that's why you're so confused, because you're like, where did that person go? And you're like, no, they were only able to maintain that representative for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and you didn't see them in a situation that required them to show up as a co-pilot or somebody who could hold emotional space for you, or somebody who could be there for you in the tough times. And you're like, oh, so when it's not just like fun and margaritas and date night, and I actually need you, and I'm having my own issues right now, this is who's showing up. That's actually who they are. We just haven't had the opportunity to see it yet.
That is the accurate description of what was happening. Yes. So for any flirties listening that have had this experience, come back to this part of the interview, because that is the truth of what's actually happening. Yeah.
I personally struggled with that for a long time in relationships, because I would always say that. I'm like, I don't understand, like, cognitive dissonance. Why did they act like this for 3 months? And it's usually around that time that the mask falls, and you're like, oh, right. Because in those 3 months, we were just, you're having a lot of fun. You're having the cocktail of dopamine and adrenaline and oxytocin, and you're not really doing like tough life things together. So, I mean, sometimes you are, right? Like some people get catapulted, but a lot of times that's what dating in the beginning is supposed to be. It's the trial run. Like, do I like this person enough to have you come into my life more and more, and kind of, you know, putting them on a 90-day PIP plan to be like, let's see what you got, and let's see, you know, how aligned this is. And in that beginning too, I think that is when you kind of turn some blind eye, especially if you've been single for a really long time. You're just like, finally somebody who gets me and sees me. And I think it's just like, kind of like if you've just been hungry for a really long time, you're like, well, these scraps will do. And you just don't really know. Yeah.
The honeymoon phase of early dating that is really fueled by a lot of neurotransmitters. There's a lot of chemical things happening in the body that are creating that connection and that bond. But then once those start to normalize, which is just natural, it's just biology. Totally. What's left, right? Who is in front of you when sort of that honeymoon, that, like, you know, giddiness of early dating, when things are going really well, when it starts to settle into a more normal life, and you've got your routines and you're going to work, and then something happens with family or a friend or your health, right? Like, what happens then? Can this person show up for you, and can you show up for them?
And that's the paradox of it, because that's where sunk cost fallacy comes in, because you're like, but I've already invested 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of my life. And so there's a version of like, well, I did all this work. I broke them in. They know my idiosyncrasies. I know theirs. These are my flaws. Right. So like, there's a version of trying to make, you know, a square peg fit into a round hole. And at some point, again, that's where you have to really start calculating, what is it going to cost me if I keep doing this? And that's a lot of the times when people, when they finally get out of it, they're disappointed with themselves, because they're like, yeah, but I knew it felt off at month 2, or I saw this flag and it was yellow and I tried to paint it green, and I saw the best in them instead of the reality in them. And that's where you have to just kind of just integrate the lessons a little bit quicker.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another reason sometimes we stay longer than we perhaps should, the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, yes, I've been with this person for so long, right? I've invested so much time, energy, attention, emotional energy into them. I got to stick it out, right? I just got to stay. But talking about that, paying the debt eventually, the cost of your future self. I mean, an accounting math lesson here on Flirtations today.
Guys, hello, welcome. Tax season is like right here, so you're welcome.
Obsessed. Reminder. Finish taxes, Benjamin. Finish taxes.
Reminder. No, but you know what? It's also, I do feel tough, I'm sure. And like, it depends where you are on your singleness journey too, right? Like
Sure.
it's easy to sit here and say, as somebody who's like, been single for a while, I went through a rough breakup like a few months ago and I had to do the work again. And you kind of get like slapped in the face to be like, oh, this does suck. There is really no way around it. And it kind of hurts. It takes you out at the knees. So when you're on the other side of it, it's easy to sit there and be like, yes, that you have to be aligned, right? Like, so when you're in it, you can't underestimate the emotional pull that it has. But that is sometimes when your self-worth has to be stronger than your feelings. Your feelings don't always matter, actually, because your feelings will leave you fucked up sometimes because they will make you do things that are emotionally charged that, again, the ROI on that emotional investment is not going to be great. And the emotional hangover that will ensue because you had that lonely night and you wanted to text them, or it was the holidays, right? So it's like you have to sometimes kind of, again, I always say that your emotions could be advisors, but they can't be drivers in all of your situations.
Yes. That's so good. Yeah, I recently made a video about this. It's like, I feel like sometimes what we do in the videos we create, right, podcasts, it seems like pretty straightforward advice. And you're listening back, you're like, oh yeah, duh, that makes sense. But when you have emotions and attraction come into the mix together, and maybe, right, it's a Saturday night and you're recently single and you're home alone, all your friends are busy, or you're just really in your feels. Oop.
Yeah, and you have to sometimes just write it out and be like, I tell people all the time that being sad and missing somebody is part of the terms and conditions of a breakup.
So
it's
true.
just what it is sometimes. Doesn't make it hurt any less, but that also doesn't mean that you made the wrong decision or that you should go back, because multiple emotions can be true at the same time. You can feel sad and miss the life that you had, the routine, the habits that you had, but also know that you are making the right decision and moving forward.
Yeah. That is so true.
But play back that director's cut, I call it, not that fantasy highlight reel. You got to play back the director's cut, behind the scenes, full length.
Extended edition, right? The unedited?
Correct. Correct. From the archives.
It's always the best version anyway.
Yes.
Truly. The most authentic version. I want to talk about perfection a little bit. Is something that is on my outline, because I think if you're getting dating advice from the internet, from social media, a lot of it lacks nuance, I feel, and can have you looking for, right, the perfect ideal partner, someone that's checking every box. But I feel like in a way that can create this situation where we may settle for singleness, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, or maybe, you're not finding someone that is checking all the boxes. And so you're like, well, this person's good enough, right? Might as well. So how does perfection maybe come into this experience?
It's a great question, because I don't think that you need to find somebody who's perfect. You need to find somebody who is perfect for you in whatever definition that means for you. And again, this is where compatibility and complementary aspects are important. How compatible is somebody with me on my core principles and my core values? The thing that really makes me personally feel supported, seen, heard, valued in a relationship. And this is actually why I'm really big on creating definitions around these things. I do this with clients all the time. Everybody has created some version of a list of what they want in their dream partner. And they'll write some kind of amorphous things of like, I want somebody who's generous. And I'm like, that's great, but what does that mean? And how will you know if somebody's showing up is generous? Because generous could be monetarily generous. It could also be somebody who's generous with their time and their energy and their thoughts, right? And so, and again, there might be a version of you 5 years ago who was like, I just want to date for money. And now you're like, I make my own money. I want somebody who can like support me and call me baby girl and kiss me on the forehead, right? Like, so you have to figure out what your definitions are. And so if somebody comes into my life that I think is, quote, perfect or not perfect, I said I wanted somebody who got me flowers on a random Tuesday. That's my definition or an example or proof of what that means. Somebody else might be coming into your life and they're like, no, my definition of generous is I give you $200 a week to go get your hair and nails done and get matcha and coffee, right? And they're like, I am being generous. But for you, that's not what you need. right? So it's really important to figure out not only what your values are, I call that your header. You need the subheader of like, but if somebody came into my life, what would that have to look like? What would that feel like? So I have proof for when emotions are very rampant in the beginning of like, it's exciting and they're sexy and they're texting me, right? When that cools down a little bit, you're like, no, let me take out my guardrail of what I said I wanted. So again, this is kind of like that double click of, love languages and all of that. But so people, I always joke, I'm like, who doesn't want to get gifts and have attention? Like I want all 5 of them, obviously, right?
Yes,
but
please.
They hold different weights. And so I think you have to, again, be honest with yourself and not feel bad about it. Sometimes people feel bad about being like, maybe I'm needy and I'm high maintenance. And I'm always like, first of all, you're not needy. You have needs. And number one, you've been maintaining yourself for a while. So you're allowed to want what you want.
Yes.
And I think it's good. Tell people what you want from jump so that you can get rid of the wrong people sooner. Because again, so many people are afraid of having that tough conversation because they're like, but then I'll have to start over again. Good. Because if you don't have that conversation now, you're going to have it in 3 months from now when they can't show up for you in a way that you need. So I think you have to get very clear on what it is that's important to me, my values, the things, again, that make me feel aligned and that we have mutual, connection on, the things that are really going to make the relationship go the distance, things that are going to help us grow in love, not just fall in love. Those are very different things. I fall in love like 10 times a day. I make up scenarios in my head at Whole Foods and, we're both reaching for the, strawberries, right?
Yes,
There's a
at Trader Joe's.
At Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's, everybody's flirting at Trader Joe's.
Oh my gosh.
It's
I fall
crazy.
in love many times at Trader Joe's.
So I think you have to understand what are my core wants and needs. And then I think the next step is, again, vision, values, lifestyles. How aligned are they? And understanding there is a difference between priorities and preferences. Would be nice if I had a partner who's skied. That's something I love doing. It's really fun for me. It's something that makes me feel fulfilled. Is that going to be the thing that's going to move the needle in 10 years into a relationship when we have a mortgage and kids and, a parent is lost and things like that, right? So that's a preference, not a priority. A priority is somebody who is health focused. That's something that's a core pillar for me, a core belief, right? Like that I and the person that I co-parent with eventually one day, or co-create, I should say, they need to have those same principles because, and I think you have to think about the big buckets, financial compatibility. That's a big one. People can tiptoe around it and be like, oh, money doesn't matter. It certainly makes life a lot easier or a lot more difficult, whether you have it or not, right? And if you're a spender and they're a saver, or you don't have a mutual shared vision for what are we doing with this $30,000 we just inherited. So, I think finances, communication, recreational compatibility, sexual compatibility, intellectual compatibility. There's all these things, and you need to figure out your definition for those.
Oh my gosh. So good. I love it. Flirties, come back and listen to this part of the interview too. I love what you said, right? You're not needy. You have needs. You're not high maintenance. You've been maintaining yourself your whole life. I love that reframe right away. And something I feel like you're speaking to is this, it's to be specific. In what you're looking for. So as that example you gave about you're looking for someone that's generous, I would say every dater is looking for someone that's generous. So if that's all you say, if that's all you're claiming to yourself, to the universe, well, someone else, whoever you're dating, may decide for you what generous looks like. They're going to fill in the gaps as your brain is trying to figure out, okay, what does generous mean to me? Someone else shows you, maybe they're financially generous, but not emotionally really available or generous, or like, you're hanging out and they're just on their phone or gaming all the time and you just want to spend time with them. They're like, well, we just went out to dinner. Like, what do you want? We're dating, we're in a relationship. Okay, but I want to spend time with you. And so if you're specific in what generosity looks like, you are much more likely to identify when that is present and when it's not. And I love this preferences versus priorities. So awesome to get specific about what you're looking for dating. It's just, it's gonna give you such a much more clear direction. And so you don't settle.
Correct. And that's why discernment and alignment are so much more important than time. People say like, well, I don't want to have to start over. Time is not as important when you are aligned with somebody. This happens in friendships all the time, right? You meet somebody and you're like, we just clicked. It's because you guys are aligned on a lot of things. And the example I always give, it's this idea if I go to a restaurant, let's say like you and I decide, I say, Benjamin, I want to go out to dinner tonight. And I said, I really want a cheeseburger. If we go to a restaurant, I said I wanted a cheeseburger. If the restaurant comes out and says, all we have is steak and a cheese platter, that's up to me to say, no, I said I wanted a cheese burger. So we're going to go somewhere else, right?
Yes. Yes.
Some people, they're so tired, they're so emotionally hungry, metaphorically, right? That they're just like, all right, fine, I'll take the steak and I'll take the charcuterie board and I'll mix it together and I'll make my own version of it. And then they're not happy. Then they feel like they settle. Then they're upset with themselves. So you have to know what it is that you want. Know that you're worthy of that, right?
Yes.
Know that you're deserving of that. And then be like, yeah, all right, well, then we're going to have to go to 4 more restaurants. But that's okay because I said I wanted a cheeseburger and I don't feel bad about that.
Yes. And if it means you stay single for a little bit longer, if it means you got a little hunger pained until you drive to that next restaurant, all good. Because guess what you're going to get? A cheeseburger. And it's going to be delicious.
Yeah. Nobody's life really got worse or they didn't die because they were single for an extra 2 years. Their life got way worse when they settled and they married the wrong partner. Or even if you don't want to get married, if you decided to, have a partnership with the wrong person, better to marry late than to marry wrong. And even when you think that you're doing it right, there's still a chance that it's not going to be right. It's hard enough to make a good relationship work when you're both full fuck yes energy going in. So imagine being unsure, kind of like, well, this is it, I guess, right? And then thinking that when you have these uphill battles that it's going to be a walk in the park.
Right.
No, it's going to be Jurassic Park and you're going to have some hard conversations you have to have with yourself.
Relationships are work. They just are, but what fulfilling work it can be. Yeah.
And if you like your job, listen, everybody this is a job, this is work, but you're having fun. Work can be fun if it's in the right field.
That's true. I love what I do.
Correct. So it's like work can be fun. And it's, again, what kind of work? How fulfilling is that work?
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. I love the flirt business. It is not without its challenges, its stressors, its worries, its concerns, its doubts, its moments of what am I doing?
Oh, well, podcasting in general. I mean, every person I podcast with, I always joke. I'm like, so how many times did you want to quit this week? Because every week I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Twice.
All the time. Literally 5 seconds before recording. I'm like,
oh my gosh. Yes. So yesterday, I was thinking like, oh my God, but then I was like, nope. We got Brianna on the show.
What if she just canceled? That would be great.
Every now and then when that does happen, I'm like, oh, thank God.
Oh no, it's a very real emotion. It's very real.
Okay, let's get into a little dater flirty Q&A with our remaining time today. A classic question here when it comes to settling. How do I know if I'm settling versus building a slow burn, right? So you're more so taking your time in the dating process versus settling.
Again, I think settling is that idea of if you've been so unsure for so long, if there's been these emotional pebbles in your shoe, if there's been a stack of yellow flags that have kind of been curated for a while, if you're asking a lot of other people for their opinion and kind of permission, or you're kind of workshopping, like, what should I do? Was this messed up? Was it not? There's probably a version of you that knows what you need to do. You're just not ready to do. A slow burn is like, all right, I have been burned in the past before. I am maybe not the quickest to get out when I need to. So I'm going to actually take some time to do a thorough vetting process. Again, it's this idea of like, you have to date like you're a Fortune 500 company. They're not hiring a CEO in 1 week interview. It's you're going through multiple rounds. I mean, we got to see you got to submit some work. We have to see how you show up when there's stress, right? So it's okay to take that time to be like, I don't know if you're a qualified candidate, because I've hired some people before when I was metaphorically understaffed and I had to do double the work in that relationship later. So I think it's understanding that idea of like, okay, am I just making sure that, again, this is fulfilling my wants and needs and I'm feeling what I need to get for my definitions? Or again, is it this kind of like, this has been going on for a while, I'm not fully fulfilled, am I staying for the wrong reasons? And having those honest conversations with yourself.
So good. Yeah. I sometimes what I feel like daters hear when they hear the slow burn is they equate that to settling. But what you're saying is, I mean, I love that you mentioned the word vetting, because that's really what you're doing in this early part of the dating process, using that discernment. And so the slow burn isn't absent consistency. The slow burn isn't absent like going on regular dates and talking and communicating, having those conversations sooner rather than later. So you're building alignment, is a word that's been coming up a few times, around core values,
priorities, preferences, lifestyle, right? Compatibility on finances, sex, right? Emotional compatibility, all the things. So you're using this slow burn process, just not rushing, right? Calling someone your person after 2 weeks, but giving yourself a little bit more time, a little bit more space.
Well, slow burn is relative too, because I think a lot of people who have that jump scare of slow burn, it's because they've probably been like, there's been some version of, let's call it a spectrum of love bombing, or they were all in, right? They were caught up in the emotion. So it's like, is it a slow burn relative to me when I got into a relationship within 2 weeks and now it's 3 weeks? So that feels extra slow. So I think you have to have some context there as well.
Yeah. That's so important, because I understand daters don't want to, kind of like quote unquote waste their time, right? With the wrong person or someone that may not be a match. But also, this is part of the dating process. It may not work out.
Correct. It's, I always joke this idea of trial and error. That means that there's going to be error involved. And people are like, well, I don't love that. And I'm like, that's kind of how it works.
Oh my God. Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. Yeah, no worries.
All right. This question, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but this person is saying, so the person they're dating has some vices that are perhaps unhealthy. Not specific as to what those vices are, but they're like, everything else in the relationship is going pretty well. Seems like things are good, but they've got these vices that I'm not about, right? So am I sort of overlooking or settling for what I don't like to really appreciate all these other aspects of my relationship that are good?
Again, I feel like if you're asking the question, you probably have some version of the answer. You just don't want to hear it or accept it. You have to look at what is the collateral damage of this vice, right? Okay. So let's say I'm going to assume it's something like, let's call it drinking. That's like kind of a touchy one. And they're like, well, no, I'm a social drinker and it's not that bad. And like, it's not like I'm waking up and chugging vodka, but okay, let's say you're a social drinker and every time you go out, you get into a huge blow up fight or they're punching the wall or things like that. You have to look at like, what is the collateral damage that is happening from that vice and how is that impacting and affecting my life, my mental health, my financial health, perhaps, right? If you're always cleaning up their messes. So I think you have to look at that. And again, where are you over indexing other things that maybe don't matter as much? So like, but they're super fun to go shopping with on Sundays, and then under indexing something like, okay, it's a core compatibility thing. Like, again, so for me, for example, like I'm a health-oriented person. I don't need to date somebody who's sober, but if you're somebody who wants to go out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, that's not going to work for me. It's not aligned for me. And I only know that because I've dated people who have had problems with drinking. And I'm just like, you know what? When the cleanup crew, I'm not interested in doing that anymore. So I think you have to ask yourself, like, what is, again, the long-term play going to happen here? And not hoping that it's going to change, because people usually just become more of who they are.
Right. Become more of who they are. Yeah, that's so true. I remember this was one of those hard lessons that took me a little bit of time to learn, because I'm very much the dater that likes to fix, that likes to give, an empath, right? Highly sensitive. So I saw this person that was not asking for help, but I perceived, they were struggling in some way. They were unhappy. Like, let me step in and just give all of myself and maybe they'll stop, right? Really dating a little bit of potential as well. But it never worked. Like, that just got me into this space of heartbreak where you're breaking your own heart sometimes in the dating process. And so, like, the lesson I had to learn is like, I don't want to be in a relationship with someone and they're drinking, or they're with this person and this other thing that is taking up so much of their time, energy, and attention. Like forgetting that we were supposed to have a FaceTime or a phone call, or not remembering a text they sent, or forgetting a date. Like I can't ever be in that space again. It was so harmful.
And if you're making the decision because you hope it's going to change or think it's going to change, if that's the reason that's making you stay, then you should test the theory and say, all right, great, this is not working for me. You go do that then. That's a problem for me. If you're going to go fix that, it's going to be on your own terms. I can't do that emotional labor right now. And then come back to me when it's worked out. But if that's the reason you're staying, it's probably not going to stick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have one more question for you from the Flirties. This one, interesting. I wanted to bring it to the conversation today about how to recognize romantic love. maybe how to differentiate that kind of true, authentic, romantic love from something like love bombing. This flirty says, afraid I won't recognize romantic love, friends, fam, easily. Like it sounds like they come from a family that was very emotionally detached, right? There wasn't a lot of that, emotional energy present in their upbringing. So they're like, how do what does this look like in dating?
That's actually such a great question because I think sometimes people say, well, I don't even know what a healthy relationship would feel like. And even if they maybe had an upbringing that there was a healthy relationship, or if it wasn't, or if you haven't been in one yourself, that's okay. What I tell people is that you need to actually choose from your future self. What would future Brianna want to feel? What would my Sunday look like with my partner? What kind of conversations would we be having? Where would we be going to dinner? What kind of friends would we be hanging out with? What kind of vacations would we be going on, right? Like this idea of what would it actually feel like for me? And you can think about the imagination that we have when we're trying to fix these losers. When we're like, imagine if they could change. And you're just like, no, let's take that imagination and put that into the position of what would it feel like? Let me imagine what the most expansive version of me, what kind of partner would I have? If I had a rough day and I had to call them on the phone, what would I want them to say to me in that moment? And a really great reframe is that if you haven't gotten what you've wanted in a relationship so far, use that as the bookend for what I will never tolerate again, or saying, when I dated people in the past and I had a bad day, every time I called them, they were dismissing my phone or they were texting somebody else, right? So saying, when I call my future partner, I want them to take me out for my favorite cup of coffee. And I want them to, get me a sweet treat, whatever that is. And again, building that, because you need to actually start to train your body and your nervous system to feel what that feels like. Your brain doesn't know the difference between that real or that perceived mind state. So if you can imagine, like, what does it feel like? How do they support me? What kind of environment, home environment do I want to create for ourselves? And if we have kids. And so I think learning to even just create that first and making that, again, definition of what does healthy love look like for me? You're allowed to define that and use that as kind of, your personal guiding post of like, well, I said, and I do this with clients a lot. I make them write a contract to themselves of what I will never allow again, or my future partner will be this kind of person and they're going to have these kinds of values. And you use that as when people come into your life until you can learn to trust yourself a little bit more again. You use that to say, right, but I told myself that I wasn't going to tolerate somebody dismissing my feelings or minimizing or being on the phone all the time when I'm with them and having an important conversation, right? And sticking to that and knowing again that you're worthy and deserving of that.
That is...
So it's a little bit like build it and they will come.
Yeah. That is so good. I love just really building that self-trust with yourself. So, right, if you're unsure what the romantic love looks like, if you've never experienced it before, or maybe you've only experienced unhealthy attachment, love that feels more harmful or takes more than it gives, make that contract with yourself. Dare I say, Delulu is a Solulu a little bit? Build it and they will come. Yes.
Yes. Build it and they will come. It works. It absolutely works. I mean, that's the idea. And again, because then you have to know, like, oh, in my made up fantasy version in my head, like this is what it felt like. And I have this person coming to me and they're acting like this. That is so not a match. Then this is a no for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The love you seek is seeking you, right? You deserve it, flirties. You deserve it. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I can't believe we're at time. Is there any just final words or insights for the flirties before we say goodbye?
I just think it's really important that people believe that they're deserving and worthy of the love that they want. And you accept the love that you deserve. So it really, you do have to start with this sense of I am deserving and worthy of love just as I am. And you will get what you want in love as long as you don't settle. You could take a rest, you could take a beat, you can, realign. But if you know that what you want is out there, if I told you you were going to meet your dream partner in 6 months from now, how would you keep living your life? Do that and build it and they will come.
Absolutely amazing. Dr. Brianna Diorio, the relationship ebook, Reflect and Connect, available on TikTok, the Brianna Approved podcast, available where you listen to podcasts, just like Flirtations. Where can they find you on the internet and perhaps work with you if you're taking clients?
Yes, I am taking clients.
Okay.
You can go to my website, briannadiorio.com, has my links to kind of everything, my Instagram,
Okay.
On my TikTok account as well. I also have a link there for working with clients. We do a whole intake form. We have prompts and mindset shifts and call to action. So it's really inclusive and hands-on. And Benjamin, thank you so much for having me. This was like an amazing conversation. And I really value what you're doing as well for, helping to empower people in the area of love and relationships.
Well, thank you for coming on Flirtations. I so appreciate the work you're doing too, just to empower daters and the flirties, all the people listening to Flirtations, to your podcast, to just, like you said, believe that they can have the love that they envision for themselves, that they're deserving of it. So appreciate your work as well. I'll send all the flirties your way. I'll have those links in the show notes below for this episode. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Benjamin.
All right, flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the How to Not Settle in Dating episode of the program. I was so excited to do this with Dr. Brianna Diorio, host of the Brianna Approved podcast. Go check it out. Her content, particularly over there on TikTok, where she's talking about a lot of relationship and dating stuff. So many amazing takeaways, new insights, puzzle pieces, mindset shifts, all of that goodness here today in this episode. I hope you loved it and enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed creating it with Brianna for you. Yeah. Thank you, Brianna. And thank you to you, the flirties, for listening, for tuning in, for streaming. Wherever you may be in the world, you make all of this possible. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. And share this episode or another favorite of Flirtations with someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with. That helps me out more than you could ever know. Thank you again for being here, for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, a week, an evening, a morning, whenever you may be listening to this. Only one thing left to say and do, and that is sign off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.